He's so good.
Did you know that one of the greatest pioneers of photography didn't even pick up a camera until she was 48 years old? Julia Margaret Cameron's work was revolutionary, blending reality and fantasy in a way that hadn't been done before. In this series, we delve into the minds of iconic photographers, learning their processes and techniques to make us all better photographers.
Our journey began at the National Portrait Gallery, at an exhibition of Julia Margaret Cameron and Francesca Woodman's work. We were inspired to go on our own voyage, to her former home, Dimbola on the Isle of Wight, the place where much of her narrative work was produced, which is now a museum and gallery.
You need the dressing up room if you wish to find it, okay?
Yes, that will do. I don't think I meant to wear jeans.
Julia Margaret Cameron was born in 1815 in Calcutta, and she was from a very aristocratic family called the Papples, was educated in London, Paris and Versailles. So she knew all about classical paintings, classical music, literature. So she had this obsession, I would say, with photography way before she actually had a darkroom or a camera.
Mrs. Cameron and the poet Lord Tenesson were close, and when Tenesson moved to Freshwater, Julia followed. After overstaying her welcome at Farringford, she bought the houses that would become Dimbola at Emily Tennyson's suggestion. Sadly, soon after his arrival, Charles had to return to Ceylon with their 2 sons, leaving Julia at a loss in Freshwater.
In 1863, her daughter gave her a camera to ease her loneliness. What started as a hobby quickly became an obsession, merging love for poetry and fantasy with her photography skills. Cameron described her camera as having voice, memory, and creative vigor, and her goal was to elevate photography into high art. To better understand her style, we conducted our own photo shoot, inspired by Cameron's techniques.
She would have shot on wet plate. I don't have access to wet plate, so the closest I can get is large format. I've got the Linoff. I'm going to shoot some 4x5 negs on that, black and white FP4, and I'm going to run a roll of portrait and a roll of Rolly Retro through this 6x9 Wister back. So that's my film stuff. I'm also going to be using the new Fuji GFX 50S2, which Fujifilm gave me for winning the Amateur Photographer Content Creator of the Year awards. Well, that's a mouthful. So from here, I've dressed Jamie up in some sort of pre-Raphaelite type stuff, and we're going to take some pre-Raphaelite style pictures out in the garden. And they're also going to feature Liam.
Our attempt to capture an essence of Julia's work on large format film and digital did little more than scratch the surface. And to truly understand what it was that she achieved and what she went through to do it, we would need to work with the hazardous process that shaped her photography.
Photography in the mid-19th century was largely a documentary medium, focusing on stiff and formal portraits. Julia's work was the opposite. She infused emotion and artistry into her images, creating an art form that broke free from convention. However, she faced criticism. Many dismissed her work as sloppy or amateur, but she persisted, convinced that photography could be more than just a mere record.
Lewis Carroll, for example, said, "I'm not fond of your out-of-focus pictures."
So Lewis Carroll used to hang around Farringford until Tenesson threw him out because he'd shown him a bootleg, an unofficial American publication of Tennyson's poems, thinking it would interest him. Tenesson thought he'd done it. They packed his bags and off he went. He and Mrs. Cameron used the same method, exactly the same method, wet collodion, to a completely different purpose. His are pin sharp, hers are cloudy, misty, slightly out of focus. Both were deliberate choices. He couldn't stand her work because it was so hazy. She couldn't stand his work because it was too realistic.
To fully appreciate her impact, we must remember that she worked in a time when photography was seen as a menial task, not an art form. Cameron redefined this perception, setting the stage for others to follow.
We went back to Dimbola to meet David Shrimpton as he was setting up his Searching for Alice exhibition. David has spent the last 7 years dedicated to taking pictures inspired by Julia Margaret Cameron, using the same techniques that she would have used.
For me, it all started, I was medium format, and I went to the Science Museum in 2016, and I saw an exhibition of Julia Margaret Cameron. I knew nothing of her, I knew nothing of wet plate collodion, and I walked out of there and I was like blown away. And then I walked over to the V&A, and lo and behold, on the wall was this egg album and print. And I'd never seen anything quite so beautiful in all my life, and I just fell in love with Julia and Alice. And ever since then, I then trained as wet plate 2 weeks later, and then I've spent the next 6-7 years just working in wet plate now.
David agreed to help us and take us through a shoot on wet plates. To recapture a little of Cameron's magic, I paired Jamie with actor Peter Raven Walsh to create a Merlin and Guinevere couple.
The wet plate collodion involves coating a medium, which is usually a sheet of glass, or it can be an aluminium tin type, with a syrupy gloop called collodion, which is a mixture of all sorts of chemicals. Once that goes onto the plate, you wait for it to gel over, so you just wait for your fingerprint to stay on the edge. At that point, you insert it into a bath of 9% silver nitrate in the dark or in red safe light. And after 3 minutes, the silver nitrate and the collodion act together, excite each other, and you end up with a photographic plate. And so you remove it under red safe light and you place it into the back of the camera, or the camera back that's going to go onto the camera. But the reason it's called wet plate collodion is because you've only got until the plate starts to dry to take the image. So you've got, depends where you're shooting, but probably 15 minutes maximum to take the plate, go back to the data room, and then develop the plate.
Okay, we're ready. So I want you kind of in together. So Merlin, you're looking here.
Right. Okay.
You're
So more.
I think you're slightly try and catch your face a little bit.
Yeah.
And I just want you on that same. I think I'm going to turn your face a little bit toward like that. Yeah. I'm going to come in. Just go in a tiny bit more, Elsa. A little bit towards it. Yeah.
Just imagine sitting like this for 9 minutes, holding the same pose, just so the composition can be correct.
That's why everyone looked miserable
I
in
know.
the photo.
They're contorted and disfigured into position.
We now think maybe 2 to 4 minutes, but it's still, you can't smile for 2 to 4 minutes. And when you've got terrible teeth, and her maids, you never see their hands because they've been all dirty. Yeah. So, and she wouldn't let them use clamps. So most Victorian photographs look so stiff because they are literally being held up by a clamp, which you don't see. But no, Mrs. Cameron made them suffer. And my God, she wanted a photographer to spare. So she got a maid, poor girl, put her in a cupboard, a dark cupboard, for I think 2 hours, I think it was. Yeah, and then let her out and photographed her, you know.
She ran away after that.
Great. Yeah. Gotcha. Okay. Here comes the shot. What's going on? Got slides coming out.
Play along with me for a second. I want you to keep completely still
Here it goes.
for the length of this exposure.
Here's the shot. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, relax everyone. Brilliant.
All the men photographers out there were taking these stilted, upright pictures that had no soul, no passion, but she did something different. Instead of just recording people, she started to create narratives, like biblical narratives, you know, and bring children in. I mean, some of her children, like the Madonna holding it's just, even today, it's just spellbindingly good. You know, how did she do that?
So she would find her models on the street. I think it's the Yarmouth Harbour Master.
Yeah.
But he worked.
William Warder. Yeah.
He was King Arthur. Found a young lady who was on holiday on the beach.
Yeah.
And she was, "Do you want to come and be in a photograph?" And 5 hours later, she emerged absolutely exhausted, hanging on to this man's ankle in a sort of strange boat.
Yes. I think it was one of the Idylls of the King, one of the King Arthur series. It always amused me because you have the man who I think took the tickets or ran the harbour at Yarmouth, working class, salt of the earth, And so there he is with a coal scuttle, tending to be a kingly helmet. And yet he images the death of Arthur. He's King Arthur. And it's wonderful. You know, he really does look like King Arthur. There's a mad gleam to his eye, you know, like he's been sort of stabbed by, you know. So she brought things out of people that they probably didn't realise that they had.
Yeah, you can try that. That's cool. Okay, you're nearly there. Agony's over soon. Well, my shadows are going to go by like. Okay, focusing up now. Dark slides coming out. Dark slides out. Lights are ready to go. Shots coming out. Here we go.
It has a look that nothing else comes close to. You think, I mean, today we were shooting with...
Oh, please don't say that.
Oh, this thing here. So that's the Dalmea 3B, built in 1894, that lens. And it was made for taking portraits. That's what it was made to do. So it's a Petzval lens. Petzval lens is invented by Joseph Petzval, 1841. And so it's got that beautiful bokeh swirl around it. So you get the sweet spot in the middle and everything else does what it's meant to do. It starts to fade. And, you know, it's like when I take a picture, I only go for the eyes. I just go for the eyes or something like that. And Jamie knows how to perform and what to do. And I let the rest, the process and the lens take over and do the rest of it. It's very special. It's very, very special. And the more I do it, the more I find people are spellbound by it.
Cameron's friendships were a source of inspiration and, at times, drama. Once, during a smallpox outbreak, she marched to Tennesson's home, demanding he be vaccinated. She was persistent, even standing at the bottom of his stairs shouting, "You're a coward, Alfred."
As the shoot went on, Peter and I started to improvise.
Actoring stuff.
Oh no.
Oh no.
I have come to you for sacrament.
Lovely. That's what we were doing, weren't it? Both in hands.
Ooh.
Oh, both in hands.
Ooh.
As we did so, it became more apparent that Julia seems much like a theatre director as opposed to a traditional photographer.
You're trying to concentrate, Queenie, but you're slightly distracted by him. You know exactly what you're doing.
Sometimes her bizarre behaviour, as it's been described, is a great way of inspiring a type of method acting. Long before Strasberg or Stanislavski.
I've done it where I've taken the hose right across the plate. That's a good one. Like scratched it right across, washing it.
You have done?
Yeah, you name it. I've done it. In the past.
Okay.
Not on this occasion.
All right, I was going to say.
No, not on this occasion. There's a narrative in here. Do you know what I mean? There's everything going on.
So what you're oofing at?
She was rediscovered in the late 50s, early 60s by the realists, the London photographers who were going out and taking iconic images. Bailey, Terry O'Neill, certainly Bailey collected her work. Then you had this whole thing in New York with Robert Mapplethorpe and Patti Smith, who bonded over her work. Remember, she was really forgotten. They saved the Herschel album for the nation. It was going to go to the States. And they built the National Museum of Photography, Film and TV in Bradford around that. And then you started to have, say, psychedelic posters. Often Alice, the image of Alice, absolutely germane. And Nick Cave used one of the ones with two children for When the Ass Saw the Angel, one of the editions of that. So she started to enter the consciousness. Had these major exhibitions at the V&A, at the National Portrait Gallery, at the Science Museum. Patti Smith very much writing about her in coming here in homage, and then Annie Leibovitz and her pilgrimage book, filmmakers and writers, an amazing number of novels. Having been a bit niche, she really has become almost a predominant Victorian photographer, I would say.
This is why I do photography. This is it. This is it. Right here, right in front of me.
That is amazing.
This is exactly why you do wet plate collodion photography. There's nothing like it. You two are absolutely geniuses. Oh my God. It's so good. That's the closest I've ever come to doing anything that looks at all like her shots. At all, ever.
My darling.
Yeah, oh yes, well done.
Oh, yes.
God.
All I want from every shoot is one shot. I want one.
More than that,
I got
isn't it?
one killer shot, and today we just went plate after plate after plate. In fact, the last plate we took, that hopefully you will show in this video, is one of the proudest plates I've ever taken in my life. I've never taken a plate like it because I've got Jamie with her incredible acting skills. I've got Peter as well, created this beautiful Elizabeth I on the throne, being spoken to by somebody in the background who's slightly out of focus. There's a story, there's a narrative. And I will never ever class my work as anywhere near Julia Margaret Cameron. And here we are in 2024, creating images that for me sort of hold their hand out to 1860.
With the colonial business shrinking and the Idylls of the King project a commercial failure, the Camerons were forced to leave freshwater for Ceylon, now modern-day Sri Lanka, where she continued to take portraits up until her death. A year before she passed, she wrote this.
O noble painter, more than genius goes to search the keynote of those melodies, to find the depths of all these tragic woes, tune thy song right and paint rare harmonies. Genius and love have each fulfilled their part, and both unite with force and equal grace, whilst all that we love best in classical art is stamped forever on the immortal face.